Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk. Number to call if you want to join the conversation, 888-589-8840. Especially like to get your reaction to my conversation with Robert Oscar Lopez. I mean, he's saying, look, it's time to fight. It's time to recognize that when it comes to the homosexual lobby, we have an enemy. Now, we need to be nice to them and we need to be courteous to them. And we're not talking about being obnoxious or hateful or anything of the sort, but it is time to stand up and fight for children. He says, look, this is the issue. When it comes to same-sex marriage, the issue that's the burning issue for him, and it's a burning issue for me, it's not the only one, probably more central to his thinking than it is to mine, but I'm just as passionately committed as he is to opposing same-sex marriage because I'm opposed to same-sex parenting. I want kids raised by a mom and a dad in an intact home. You want to weigh in on that whole subject? 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. So I kind of want to hear from you if you think we ought to fight. Are you tired of evangelical leaders that won't fight on the issue of same-sex marriage, that want to finesse this, that want to resort to nuance, that won't stand up and be counted, that won't fight for vulnerable young children? Are you tired of that? Do you want fighters? You know, this Robert Oscar Lopez saying, look, I can't even get speaking engagements in the United States. And you heard what he said in that's what he says. That's all he says. But a lot of pro-family groups think it's too strong. It's too toxic. It's too radioactive. It's too controversial. You go too far. We can't have you out there saying that stuff. Well, you heard him. He's a mild-mannered guy. Everything he said, right on point, very articulate. I mean, he wasn't waving his arms. He wasn't using profanity. He wasn't blasting anybody. He was just saying, look, the rights of a child trump the rights to a child, and it's time that we fight for that. 888-589-8840. He says, one of the reasons that I was so available to help European allies was practical, having been blacklisted and driven out of the public square by a cadre of unhinged homosexual fascists. I could make no appearances in the United States, and thus I had a wide open schedule to go to Europe. Now, he uses the word fascist. Now, he has a homosexual background, raised by lesbian parents. He knows what he's talking about. He came out of that community. And he says, look, what we are dealing with here is a form of fascism in the United States. He refers to a cadre of unhinged homosexual fascists. So he says, I'm willing to go to bat for children, but he says, I was largely invisible in the United States. Listen to this. Conservatives who wanted to defend marriage focused on buttoned-up academic postulations, religious freedom arguments like the ones championed with vetoed legislation in Arizona, and warnings about a slippery slope leading to polygamy. I had chosen an urgent and stark tone in my argumentation, naming same-sex parenting as child abuse, invoking past history when social experimentation led to atrocities, and rejecting sentimentality in favor of probing scrutiny. There was still a belief among many defenders of marriage that compassion, civility, and professionalism could overwhelm the gay lobby with kindness. He says, forget about it. It ain't gonna happen. He says, when you see a movement as unprincipled and ruthless, now notice this is a former homosexual. He still calls himself a bisexual, so he would consider himself in some sense a homosexual. He says, when you see a movement as unprincipled and ruthless as the gay lobby, and he made it very clear, look, my beef is not with homosexuals. My beef is with the gay lobby. It's with homosexual activists that are pushing the radical homosexual agenda. He says this, when you see a movement as unprincipled and ruthless as the gay lobby, you must be clear that you have an enemy. The gay lobby is not your friend. Any friendliness from them is likely manipulation and subterfuge, just trying to set you up and try to use you in some way. Many conservatives, he says, even the ones fighting gay marriage, have viewed me as a liability and cooperated with the blackout. Other right-wing journals won't publish me. For a year and a half, I got many queries from college students interested in having me speak, but conservatives sponsoring them deemed me too controversial. When he spoke and testified in Minnesota, February of 2013, again on this issue of same-sex parenting, behind the scenes, I received a steady flow of worried emails from conservative family advocates. You're going too far. You can't compare slavers to gay dads like my dear friends who have 3 surrogate children by 5 egg-donating and womb-renting breeders, which precipitated radio silence. And I don't know if it means by radio silence, he can't even get invited onto a respectable radio program. I mean, Sandy Rios and I may be about the only radio hosts in America that are willing to bring this guy on and give him a platform for his message, which I think is very, very important. The gay lobby has succeeded because its leaders have been willing to employ every kind of wickedness, simultaneously lying, manipulating, betraying, playing the victim, using human shields, accusing, intimidating, buying friends, and destroying enemies. But he says, look, the real problem all along is that conservatives have never been willing to fight back. You know, we talked about this. Gay parenting, he says, is built on sheer adult selfishness, but too many conservatives are scared of saying so because they are afraid to offend. It wouldn't be so bad if they chose to live in silence, but at least supported those of us who are willing to call people out for doing things that are wrong. Yet when I say things like this, conservatives get scared, the radio silence deepens, and I end up in Europe again. And here's what he says. If we do not defend marriage as the institution that exists to safeguard against such objectification of children, we are doomed merely to manage the fallout of our own weakness. We will be begging to be left alone. That's Russell Moore. That's what Russell Moore wants to do. He just wants us to be left alone. Russell Moore says, we've lost. Let's give it up. Let's accept the inevitable. It's no point even fighting. Battle for same-sex marriage, it's gone. We've lost. It's over. Forget about it. So the best we can do is hope to be left alone. And here's what Robert Oscar Lopez says will happen when we try that. We will be begging to be left alone, and our begging will not work because we will have surrendered what really mattered in the first place, justice for the vulnerable. Having failed to speak for those too young to speak for themselves, we will reap the punishment of having nobody to speak for us when the great beast comes to devour us next. Therefore, he says, instead of crying over the predictable misdeeds of a lobby that has revealed itself for all its evil, we need to fight. Fight to win. Fight gay marriage. Because the gay lobby chose to yoke marriage to a right to have a child. Fight gay adoption. Because the gay right to have a child means that children become objects and adults become slave owners again, basically buying children, which is a form of slavery. Stop worrying about your gay neighbor getting a regular spot on the radio, being accepted, distinguishing yourself from the supposed bigots, the folks who are really doing all the fighting for you. Fight for God's sake. Fight. I think that's a powerful, powerful word. All right, let's grab a phone call or two before the end of the break. Let's grab a call from Scott, Danceyville, Tennessee. Scott, welcome. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I actually had to blow the dust off my old textbooks. I got an old basic psychiatric nursing textbook. Now, it's in the 70s. And I think it's a form of child abuse from what I'm reading because gender is not something you're born with. You have to be taught. You have to learn that you're a boy from watching your grandpa, your daddy, your brother, your cousins, and the same thing as being a girl. And it's written in there because we used to treat it for that. We found out that most homosexuals at some point in their childhood, whether it was a single, whatever the circumstances, this part of their growing up was neglected somehow. Now, of course, you still have your people who are just morally wrong, but I totally agree. I think it's child abuse, and if you don't allow boys to learn to be boys and girls learn to be girls, I think you're doing a great harm.
All right. Well, listen, thank you for the call. I appreciate that, Scott. Thank you for that. We've talked about it before, but Mark Regnerus confirming everything that you heard Robert Oscar Lopez say. He did the research, the most extensive research that's been done on adults who grew up in same-sex households, and they fared worse on 77 out of 80 outcomes, 77 out of 80 outcomes compared to children who were raised in an intact home where they were raised by their biological parents. So when he says, look, this is a form of child abuse, he's not exaggerating. The social research backs him up. All right, let's go to Jason in Elizabethtown. Jason, welcome. What's on your mind?
Hey, I appreciate you taking my call.
Yes, sir.
I totally disagree with your with the gentleman you had on earlier.
Yes, sir.
Regardless of his research, I was raised in a homosexual home. I have a sister that was also raised in a homosexual home. Neither one of us are homosexual. We were raised in a loving and caring environment. And you cannot lump every homosexual or gay parent in with these radicals that are out there beating their chest about issues. I don't understand why we're spending so much time on this, and we should, as Christians, be spending more time on the children who are raised in broken homes and abusive homes. That's where we're called to go. And I'm coming from a point of view from somebody that's been there. I'm married. I've got 2 kids of my own. My sister's married. She's got 2 kids of her own. We were never directed to be homosexual or gay. We were raised to live our own lives and speak our own minds. And I just don't think you can lump everybody into that group.
Okay, Jason, let me ask you one question to finish up here. You were raised in a same-sex household. You have 2 children. If you had the choice to have them raised by you and your wife, or to have them raised by 2 homosexuals or 2 lesbians, which option would you choose and why?
It would not matter. As long as they were in a loving and caring and nurturing environment, I don't think it matters.
So you would be fine. I mean, would you be willing to adopt your children out to a homosexual couple that didn't have children? Is that something you'd be willing to do?
I would have no reason to adopt my child out. I mean, that's a hypothetical that doesn't make sense to me. I mean, why would I want to adopt my child out?
Okay, but you don't see any advantages to your children being raised in your household over a homosexual household. You don't see any advantages.
I do not.
Okay, all right, Jason, I'm out of time. I'm sorry about that. But listen, thank you for the conversation. Thank you for your honesty. Appreciate that. Focal Point AFR Talk. We'll be right back after the news.